Hello, I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director and founder of BIZTOOls. Welcome to the Accountant's Minute podcast. R&D tax incentive, advisory opportunity for your firm? I've got a big question mark after that. And I hope you do decide that research and development presents tremendous opportunities for your professional firm. Because I think accountants need to do a lot more in making ourselves available and proactively talking about the concept of research and development. And I suspect that some of the detail that I'm going to discuss with you today will come as a surprise, because research and development is alive and well in Australia. Some people have told me over the years, Pete, we can't really get involved in research and development because I'm not an engineer or a scientist. And I said, well, what's that got to do with it? Why do you need to be an engineer or a scientist? And the response has generally been along the lines, well, we've got to do the research activities and understand what they're all about. I said, no, you've got it all wrong. That's not what you've got to do. Your client's got to do that. Your client is the one that's wanting to undertake the research and development activities. And if the client's not at the right level of competency to be able to undertake the research and development activities, they will need to hire an external expert, whether that's a department of a university who can undertake that work on a fee-for-service basis, or a specialised consultancy firm that are generally in capital cities around Australia. They can be hired to assist, and the costs for them to undertake the work is all claimable as part of the research and development program. So it's a myth to say that accountants cannot do research and development advice. I think your advice, though, is more aligned to being the internal auditor, because there's a significant amount of paperwork involved in undertaking research and development. Indeed, in ESS BIZTOOLS, we have 50 forms we've prepared. Now, I'm not suggesting you're going to need all 50 forms on one client, but if you handle 10, 15 companies a year that are undertaking research and development, you may occasionally use all the forms. But we've put them into the system because when we've read the legislation, there's obviously some circumstances that someone may have to record that particular information. So we've got a form for you to be able to use. So that's the first big myth relating to research and development. And then there's another one, and I find this far more interesting, and it's probably disturbing. And that is that some of my professional colleagues around the place in various conferences have come up and said to me, oh, not many SMEs are interested in research and development. I say, oh, is that your observation, is it? I said, that's different to mine. I was involved as a business advisor in a major Australian government grant program for 12 years, commercialising emerging technology, it was called. It was a program that was initiated when John Howard was the Prime Minister, and he really wanted it presented by private consultants, and that's what we did. And I was one of 12 in Australia, and we worked with a lot of people who had undertaken research and development, and they're all SMEs. So I think it's fairly widespread. And then on the 25th of September, the Tax Office released their R&D Tax Incentive Transparency Report for 2022-23. I said, this is wonderful, because what it did, it highlighted that SMEs are very important players in Australian research and development. 46% of the participating companies were companies with turnovers less than $10 million. Now, there's a lot of small businesses got higher turnovers than $10 million. So generally, I always look at small businesses being at least $20 to $30 million in turnover, but some businesses are up over $100 million in turnover. So 46% of the total R&D participants in 2022-23 were for companies with turnovers less than $10 million. Now, the big question then is, well, how many companies were there? 6,016 small businesses, turnovers under $10 million, participated in the research and development scheme. And then there was a further 4,507 that the tax office identified as being privately owned and wealthy groups that were not public companies that had turnovers over $10 million. But some of those entities could well be clients of accountants that ESS BIZTOOLS target our services at. Now, we have some subscribers who are termed top 100 firms, and I think they basically subscribe to us because they're wanting access to the research and development material packages that we have produced to assist. So coming back to the story, so 6,016 small businesses, small companies, and 4,507, a little bit bigger, but some of them would fall under the definition of small businesses. That's a lot of businesses. And yet a lot of accountants over the years have said to me, "I know research and development. We don't know anything about that." Well, I think you should know something about it because you know it's all centred in the Tax Act. Yeah, everything to do with research and development is in the Tax Act. Sure, AusIndustry do a lot of work. They do the verification that it's legitimate research and development activities, but the tax office handle all the financial side of it. We also need to be aware of the benefits that companies with turnovers under $20 million can obtain from this process. If they are trading at a loss and they are undertaking research and development expenditure, then the calculated amount of the tax rebate can be paid out to the company. And in fact, the tax office will pay it out within 30 days of the tax return having been lodged. Probably not as quick as that if the return is after the 30th of April, but if you can get the work in earlier, so it's getting processed a lot earlier than in those last couple of months, and everyone's not as busy, you'll get that refund paid into your client's bank account within 30 days. And your client will be very thankful because a lot of the small businesses are using those refunds to finance their next round of expenditure and work. The average expenditure by small businesses was also very interesting. $403,232 was the average expenditure for that group, 6,016 companies with turnovers less than $10 million. And the average expenditure for that next group of companies with turnovers over $10 million, but some of which could be defined as small businesses, the average expenditure was $1,111,000. So a lot of money is getting spent on research and development. How many of your clients are undertaking research and development? Have you discussed research and development with your clients? I think it's a very interesting subject to bring up. and talk about it. And at times I found people come to me and say, oh, I was in the pub the other night and I heard one of my competitors, who I don't like, and he was bragging he got a research and development grant. And I want to know how I can get a grant, because he'll use whatever benefits he's getting from that grant to compete against me. I said, okay, let's calm down and let's analyse this. Number one, there's no research and development grant. He would have received a taxation rebate. Oh, okay, right. Well, he's still got it, hasn't he? I said, well, you're telling me he's got it. So the simple way then is to say to the client, well, okay, let's go through it. First of all, your current business is a partnership. Yeah, as he said, so what? I said, well, you've got to be a company. Oh, so we'll have to look at having you incorporated as a company and change over the business. There's a bit of work to do there. Now, to claim the tax offset, you have to spend more than $20,000 on legitimate research and development activities in the financial year that you're making the claim. So what sort of research and development activities are you going to be conducting? Now, I've had some strange answers to that question, I've got to admit. I've had people who are running factories and going to do research and development say to me, well, what do you think we should do? I said, hey, I'm just an accountant. And my role in all this is basically akin to being the internal auditor. So I'll look after making sure you've done the paperwork properly and then put it all together so we can lodge the first return's got to go to AusIndustry within 10 months of the end of the financial year, but preferably within 3 or 4 months of the end of the financial year. And you've got to handle the research. So you've got to sit down and work out what you want to do. Or are you only doing all this as a knee-jerk to the concept that your competitor has got some sort of research and development benefit? He said, yeah, but if he can think up a research and development project, so can I. I said, yeah, but there's other tests. We've got to make sure that someone hasn't already registered a patent or some sort of document on that particular concept. Maybe your competitor's already done that. Or he wouldn't have done that yet, I got told. I said, well, we can't be sure on that, can we? So you need to do some searches. How am I going to do that? Well, you need to, first of all, to clearly define what you are going to invent, because you then need to undertake searches on the internet and keep copies of what you search for and what you got back. That if you wish to claim research and development, you're going to have to be able to say that you were not able to find that anyone in the world has registered this concept. Or you could go to a patent attorney. Oh, okay. But I said that will cost you money. And you could sit down and talk to the patent attorney, but the patent attorney will want to know what your concept is, what you're trying to do. The patent attorney is not going to sit there and work that out for you. He or she will want your instructions. This is what my invention's going to cover, and I want to make sure before I go spending too much money on this that someone hasn't already done this. And the patent attorneys in Australia, of course, are very familiar with the research and development benefits that are available under the Taxation Act. So they will undertake that task. There are others you can go to. There are specialised research organisations, as I said earlier, who you could hire to help you undertake your research and development activities. But you need to make sure that this has all been done in a proper, systematic manner. And that's some of the wordings that's contained in the legislation, a systematic approach. You need to be able to say to your clients that they need to appreciate that the laws on research and development were originally drafted by the government of the day, thinking of the big end of town, big business, where they assumed that there were people there who would implement processes, very similar to what the government bureaucrats envisaged would happen within universities where they were undertaking research and development. They would have a plan. They would have a vision. They would have a concept as to what they were going to do. In the first instance, there has to be an idea. This is what we would like to do. And this is what we think is going to be involved. And we need to identify how this process will be undertaken. And it's a good idea from a company's point of view to make sure that you've got some idea of how many man hours are going to have to be spent on the work. Now, I've acted for some very large expenditures on research and development, over $2-3 million in a year. Small businesses undertaking that expenditure. But there's others that barely get over the $20,000 minimum. But you need to make sure you get the record keeping right and understand what's going to happen. I think it was interesting also to look at the information from the tax office about what the top 5 industries were for small business expenditure on research and development. Professional, scientific and technical services, $1,238,000 across 2,820 industries. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of companies. Manufacturing, $402 million for 1,136 companies. Information, media and telecommunications, a total of $122 million across 340 companies. Wholesale trade, total expenditure, $83 million for 273 companies. And retail trade, total of $82 million over 247 companies. So for the top 5 expenditure areas, a total of 4,816 small companies were involved in those categories. This is a significant opportunity for accountants to be having a very close look at this whole area and saying, how many clients have we had in the last 12 months that have talked to us about research and development? And let me frame a question to you. How many times have you or your colleagues asked the questions to your clients? Are you undertaking research and development? If you are going to offer advisory services, I think it's an essential question that should be getting asked for each of your clients every year. Because you never know when they'll get a brainwave. And if you haven't been talking to them about research and development, they may assume that you don't know anything about it, or you're not interested in it, and you can't help them. And they have to go off and talk to a far larger accounting firm to get advice. And obviously with 6,016 companies, and let's say half of those privately owned and wealthy groups of companies, probably could be another 2,000 there. We could be looking at a figure of 8,000 companies that are defined as small businesses. A lot of accountants are obviously servicing that market. However, over the years, I have found it very, very difficult to talk to accountants at conferences and other events who are able to discuss research and development with me. So they're not giving the advice. So some firms are doing very well out of it. They probably don't like me spruiking the concept of research and development to the rest of the profession, because I think you should be looking at it. And there's another very important reason I think you should be looking at it. It is a gateway to the innovation highway for your SME clients. You can help them to grow. If they're able to invent some new technologies, new processes to get better production flow in their workshops, in their factories. And look at those figures. Professional, scientific and technical services was the total expenditure, $1.2 billion. It's a lot of money across 2,820 companies. So Be well worth giving a look at those categories. I've never noticed the figures so high for retail trade previously either, or wholesale trade. Both around $82 million was spent. How many more opportunities were there out there? Have all the SMEs claimed what they could have claimed? Or were they put off because their accountants showed no enthusiasm? So the way you can show enthusiasm is each year when you're sitting down having one of, I hope, a number of meetings with your clients, you have it on the agenda. Have you undertaken or thought about undertaking any research and development? And the client might say, well, where would that start? Well, it starts with an idea. And it might be a young apprentice on the factory floor, goes over to the foreman and says, hey, boss, why are we doing it this way? I was lying in bed last night. I couldn't sleep. And I was thinking, and I've got this. And he pulls, and I've seen this happen. I wasn't there when this happened, but my client showed me. The young kid, he said, pulls out this bit of paper, and he's been out lying in bed at night, and he's written out a whole new schematic as how something could be done. Second year apprentice, apparently. And they decided to take it further. So that was the idea. That's where it starts from. And then that was developed into a reasonable product. You might have your clients thinking of that. And at first they just screw it up and throw it away and said, oh, it's too difficult. I don't know to go and get advice on this. We're going to have to go and see one of those big accountancy firms, and I don't want to deal with them. I'll have to go and buy a suit to go and see them. And then you ask the question, are you undertaking any research and development? And the client says, what? Do you know something about that? Can you help us? Now, you could say, well, it's in the Tax Act, and we're very competent on the Tax Act, but that might be a bit too cheeky to say to your client in that way. But I think we need to be saying to our clients, yes, we can help you. Because as businesses go into research and development, my observation over the years and working with a lot of them is that they get enthusiastic, things look like they're working out, but they use up a fair bit of money. So they start looking then, well, where else can we get money from? You know, they might get hold of their mother-in-law's home unit and mortgage it for a while, but there can be days of reckoning on those sorts of things. So where else can they go? Well, they can look at getting ready to try to raise some capital. And there's a great scheme there for them to raise capital called early stage innovation companies. Now, in ESS BIZTOOLS, we've got full packages on everything that I'm talking about so far. Research and development, now early stage innovation company. And it's targeting young companies, not young people running them or young executives. I've dealt with some people in early stage innovation companies who were quite elderly. And they had an idea and they wanted to follow it through. Or you could look at crowdsource funding equity raising. As long as their turnover is under $25 million, they could raise up to $5 million in a 12-month period. And do the same the following year also if they want to, and if the crowdsource funding intermediary agrees. So research and development can be the gateway to getting a lot of other activities. Because once you're involved in that, for your client to raise capital, they need a business plan. And not just something you go off in the back room and write for them. You need to sit down with their leadership team and get them to articulate their vision. This is what they want to do with this. You then need to make sure that you analyse the business plan and prepared predictive accounting reports, budgets, key drivers, looking at the key sub-accounts, inventory, completed stock, debtors, creditors, research and development activities. What are these so that these items just don't get hidden within the cash flow? There's a separate sub-account prepared for them so that it's very obvious what's going on. Because you're going to need to control the cash flow in all this. What's the cash flow forecast look like? What's the projected balance sheet telling us? Is your company looking pretty secure? They might need to raise $1 million. The average capital raise for crowdsourced funding equity raising is currently about $900,000. But there's quite a number of companies raised well over $1 million. There's been 4 raised the full $5 million in a 12-month period. And there's been some companies that have now had 2 or 3 capital raises over the period because they've raised the money, they've spent that money, they've plowed it back into the business, and they've gone back to the market. They've represented their business plans and their vision. Who do you think can help them do that? You. They're going to need advice. They need advice for the business plan, the financial forecasts, to get them organized, to act as the company secretary, to give them some mentoring and training in company directors' duties. And we got all this in ESS BIZTOOLS. And they need to understand whatever capital raising process they're going to use, whether it's early stage innovation company or crowdsourced funding equity raising company, or dealing with venture capitalists, or dealing with Section 708 of the Corporations Act. And we've got full packages to help you to be able to be the expert when you're talking to your client, because we've got the whole process sorted out. So this is why I get excited about research and development, because it is the opening gate. You can't get into the field unless you go through the gate to get into the game, whether it's a cricket or football or a running event. You've got to get into the starting area and the play area. And that is where research and development is so important. And it's there in front of us all. It's within the accounting training. Don't get mystified by this myth that you have to be a scientist or an engineer to be able to understand it. I've acted for that many R&D clients, I really can't remember all the details. But I don't profess to understand what some of them have been doing. That's not the role. The role is to make sure the documents are prepared and the client has got what they need, and the documentation goes, first of all, to AusIndustry, and then the tax return can be lodged. So the challenge is over to you. Research and development can be very beneficial for your clients, but also for your accounting firm. I hear complaints from all around Australia about talent attraction and talent retention. I think if you will find, in fact, I know from my own experience, if you're proactive in encouraging work with clients on research and development, and then the follow-on activities that I just referred to, the innovation journey of business plans, budgets and cash flow forecasts, setting up their systems on the 52-week business enhancement system, daily, weekly, monthly, of talking to them about board of directors operations, board of advice operations, company secretary duties, that your team members will be very keen to be involved, and you'll have people wanting to join your organization because your firm will become well known as an interesting and exciting place to work, because your team's not sitting there all day, every day, doing taxation work. So you can visit our website to get more information. The research and development packages that we have developed at ESS BIZTOOLS, we've got 2 of them. We've got the first one, which looks at the research and development introduction. It was primarily designed for accounting and bookkeeping firms that have never gotten involved in research activities before. And you want some backup to ask that basic question to a client. Are you undertaking research and development? So that's the research and development package. You can subscribe to it as a standalone package. And then we have the research and development consolidated package. This includes everything from the original, I've got a vision, I've got an idea, I've got a dream, whatever we want to paraphrase that as, and it goes right through to the lodgement of the annual document return with AusIndustry, and then after AusIndustry's assessed that and issued the all-important reference number, that gets inserted in the company's tax return. so that you can then lodge the company's tax return with the ATO and they will process the figures. And if your client's trading at a loss and they've elected to get the cash refund, within 30 days, the tax office will send them a payment direct into their bank account for the equivalent of that R&D rebate amount. So that's how it works. And there's a separate package for the Research and Development Consolidated that you can subscribe to. So to get more information, please go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, and then click on to packages and pricing, and you will see the three main packages which we have: starter, advanced, and financial forecasting, and then alongside them, individual packages. And included in the individual packages is the Research and Development Introduction Package and the Research and Development Consolidated Package. If you need more information, you can then contact us. You also receive a subscription to our monthly newsletter, which we designed so you can send it to your clients. And it's a summary of ideas for their business that if they wish to implement them, they've got to come back and talk to you. That's called Business Plus. So you get that as part of your subscription to ESS BizTools. We've got training availability. You're able to participate in all of our training. 30 training sessions per annum we conduct for our subscribers. And you receive our monthly newsletter, which we send to our subscribers. Please contact us if you need more information. I look forward to talking to you again next week when we explore the Accountant's Minute in this podcast. Stay safe. Have a great day. Goodbye.